Hi, wherever you are in the world. It's Sickle Cell Awareness Month, and I was thinking, what should I talk about? And I think I want to talk about types of sickle cell disease. There are many types of sickle cell disease. Sickle cell disease is a group of disorders. But before I start, let me define sickle cell disease for those that don't know what it means. Sickle cell disease are a group of disorders, blood genetic disorders inherited from one's parents. It occurs when you inherit two abnormal hemoglobin genes from your parents. When we say two abnormal hemoglobin genes, what do we mean? Okay, for normal hemoglobin genes, we have hemoglobin genes like hemoglobin A, hemoglobin A2, hemoglobin F. Those are normal hemoglobin genes. And the abnormal hemoglobin genes are genes that have been mutated. They are the ones that are called abnormal hemoglobin genes. Examples of abnormal hemoglobin genes are hemoglobin S, hemoglobin C, hemoglobin D, hemoglobin G, hemoglobin O. There are so many. In fact, we see new mutations daily. So because of the new mutations, there are so many types of sickle cell disease. We can't even finish mentioning them. So when you inherit two abnormal hemoglobin genes from your parent, and at least one of them is hemoglobin S, then you have sickle cell disease. When you inherit hemoglobin S from your father and C from your mother with the genotype SC, that's the type of sickle cell disease. If you inherit hemoglobin D from your father and hemoglobin S from your mother, that's hemoglobin SD genotype. Then you have another type of sickle cell disease. I hope you get it. So because there are so many types of sickle cell disease, I will just talk about the four main types and mention some other types. Okay, let's start with the most common type, sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia is the most common type of sickle cell disease. In over 70% of people that live with sickle cell disease have sickle cell anemia. And this occurs when you inherit hemoglobin S from one of your parents and you inherit hemoglobin S from your mother, from the other parents. You inherit S from your father and S from the mother. It's an homozygous inheritance of hemoglobin S gene. That's when you have genotype SS, and it is called sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia is, like I said, is the most common type, and it is usually the most severe type because the hemoglobin S quantity is usually higher in sickle cell anemia. So the sickling process will be higher and the complications will be higher, usually. But there are other factors that can make someone with a supposedly milder type of sickle cell disease like SC have a more severe cause than someone with sickle cell anemia. There are factors that determine severity that can cause that. Type of sickle cell disease is one of the factors. But in most people, sickle cell anemia is more severe than other types of sickle cell disease. Okay, so let's go to hemoglobin SC disease or sickle hemoglobin C disease. That is when you have the genotype SC. You inherit hemoglobin S from one of your parents and hemoglobin C from another. And when you do this, you have hemoglobin SC disease, which is another type of sickle cell disease. And when you have hemoglobin SC disease, it is supposed to be milder. Most of the time, it is usually milder because the hemoglobin S quantity is usually lesser. It's usually around 50%. So it's usually less, unlike hemoglobin SS. It's usually the hemoglobin S quantity in hemoglobin SS is usually greater than 90%. It's like about 90% or higher. Usually. So, but in hemoglobin SC, it is usually around 50%. So the sickling process will reduce, and usually the sickling process should reduce, and there should be less complications and less crisis usually. But there are factors that can make someone that has hemoglobin SC disease have a more severe disease than someone that has hemoglobin SS disease. There are other factors that affect severity. which we will talk about. You can check my page. You can read about severity of sickle cell disease and factors that determine them. So, okay, another type, and is the second. Hemoglobin S disease is the second commonest type of sickle cell disease after hemoglobin SS. So let's go to the two other types that are a bit common. Those are let me start with sickle beta zero thalassemia, or sickle beta null thalassemia. Sickle beta null thalassemia. This happens when you inherit beta thalassemia gene from one of your parents, and you inherit hemoglobin S gene from another parent. That is why it is necessary to know if you have beta thalassemia traits or not, because it is important in the genetics of sickle cell disease. So if you have beta thalassemia traits, it is better not to have children with someone who has sickle cell traits, which is hemoglobin S, because if you do, your child can have sickle cell disease. So sickle beta zero thalassemia is a type of sickle cell disease that is also called sickle cell anemia. And this is why it is also called sickle cell anemia. On hemoglobin electrophoresis, which is the test that is usually done in Nigeria, for example, on hemoglobin electrophoresis, sickle cell hemoglobin SS, sickle cell anemia, and sickle beta zero thalassemia shows as SS on hemoglobin electrophoresis. So if you do the tests, what you will see, it will come out as SS, because both have high level of hemoglobin S. Because in the test there will be they will be able to see hemoglobin S and hemoglobin F without hemoglobin A. That's what they see in both hemoglobin SS and sickle beta zero thalassemia. It's just that the S quantity of sickle beta zero thalassemia is around 80% to 90%. So you can see it is as high. So when we talk about sickle cell anemia, everything that concerns sickle cell anemia, HBSS, also concerns sickle beta zero thalassemia, because it is almost as severe. The hemoglobin S quantity are almost at the same level. That is why it is also sometimes called sickle cell anemia. Listen, sickle beta zero thalassemia. Okay, so another type of sickle beta thalassemia is sickle beta plus thalassemia. Sickle beta plus thalassemia is a milder type of is milder compared to sickle beta zero thalassemia, because here we have hemoglobin A. In sickle beta zero there is no hemoglobin A, but in sickle beta plus we have hemoglobin A. So with the presence of hemoglobin A, there is lesser hemoglobin S. So in sickle beta zero thalassemia, you see hemoglobin A, S, and F. And let me say something. On hemoglobin electrophoresis, sickle beta plus thalassemia will show as sickle cell trait. So there are some people that think they have sickle cell traits. If you've not done any test other than hemoglobin electrophoresis, you might think you have sickle cell traits when what you really have is sickle beta plus thalassemia. Because it is only the percentage that is different. In hemoglobin A, in sickle cell trait, you have hemoglobin A is about 60%. Hemoglobin S is about 40%. While you can have with hemoglobin F of less than 2% or more, depending. It could be more, depending on the variation. But that is usually the quantity of hemoglobin gene in sickle cell traits. The hemoglobin S is usually about 40%, and hemoglobin E is usually about 60%. While in sickle cell beta plus thalassemia, we have hemoglobin A. There is also hemoglobin A. It is just in lesser quantity. There is hemoglobin A. There is hemoglobin S. The hemoglobin A is just in lesser quantity than sickle cell traits. And you see hemoglobin F2 usually. And the hemoglobin F can be a bit higher than that of sickle cell traits. So you see similar things on hemoglobin electrophoresis. So it is easy to get a false positive result for someone with sickle cell trait. This is not a mistake of the lab technician. You need an advanced test to actually separate these two. You need an advanced test. So sickle cell beta plus thalassemia can show a sickle cell trait on hemoglobin electrophoresis. It will be seen as sickle cell trait on hemoglobin electrophoresis. So sickle cell beta plus thalassemia is usually less severe. The severity is usually around hemoglobin SC. And hemoglobin SC genotype and sickle beta plus have similar severity. It's usually less. So it's not as severe as the sickle cell anemia or sickle beta 0 thalassemia. Do you get? So there are some other types of sickle cell disease that are not common. So I'll just mention a few. Hemoglobin SC, hemoglobin SD, Punjab, hemoglobin SD, Los Angeles, hemoglobin SG, Philadelphia. There are so many types of sickle cell disease because of different mutations that are coming up. They are not common. And few of them are very severe. Few of those types are many of them are not as severe, but few of them are just like, I know 1 or 2 of them that are not common. There's one that we have only 10 cases, and it is as severe as sickle. We have less than 10 cases, and it's as severe as sickle cell anemia. So, I hope I've been able to educate you on the types of sickle cell disease, and we shall talk next time. Thank you.